She had $11.08 in her bank account, not $12, not even a clean number. $11.08. The kind of balance that doesn't feel like poverty. It feels like a punchline. Sorrel Vance sat in the corner booth of a diner off I-95 New Jersey. Phone cracked at the corner. A glass of water sweated on the table beside her. Untouched. The booth smelled like old coffee and someone else's problems. 3 missed calls from her landlord. 1 voicemail. She hadn't played it. You don't get 3 calls without already knowing what the 4th one means. Across from her, her son Cairo sat quietly, peeling the label off a ketchup bottle. 7 years old. The kind of still that only children who've moved too many times ever learn. He didn't ask for pancakes. Didn't ask for juice. Just sat there, peeling that label like it was the most important thing in the world. That quiet hurt more than anything. She refreshed her email for the 14th time that hour. A cleaning agency said no. A hotel front desk job never called back. A babysitting gig needed a car she didn't own. Then the ad appeared. She almost scrolled past it. No logo, no agency name, no friendly language. Just plain text, like someone had typed it at 3 a.m. and didn't care how it looked. Live-in nanny needed, immediate start. Compensation, $7,500 per month. Must be resilient. Do not apply if easily overwhelmed. Previous candidates were not suitable. She read it twice, then a third time. $7,500 a month. That was rent, groceries, Cairo's school clothes, the winter coat he'd outgrown, the dentist appointment he'd been waiting on for 8 months. And the phrase previous candidates were not suitable should have made her close the tab. It didn't, because $11 doesn't give you the luxury of hesitation. She typed fast. No polished cover letter, no false modesty, just the truth, experienced with difficult children, available immediately, reliable. She hit send before she could argue with herself. Cairo looked up. What did you do? Applied for something. Something good? She stared at the screen, at that one strange line. Previous candidates were not suitable. I don't know yet, she said. He nodded like uncertainty was just part of life. Like it was weather. You didn't like it, but you moved through it. She loved him for that more than she could say. The reply came 11 minutes later, not the next morning. Not after a screening call. 11 minutes. Her interview confirmed. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Greenwich, Connecticut. Address enclosed. Do not share it. She read that last line 3 times. Do not share it. Who puts that in an interview confirmation? What kind of job opens with a secrecy clause before you've even sat down? She should have searched more. Should have called someone, except she didn't have anyone to call. She closed the app, looked across the booth. Cairo had fallen asleep, cheek pressed against his jacket, folded into a rough pillow on the vinyl seat. She draped her hoodie over him, watched his chest rise and fall. Outside, cars blurred past on I-95. Headlights, then dark. Headlights, then dark. She sat there until past midnight, watching the door of that diner like something she couldn't name was already watching her back. She told herself it was just nerves. She told herself a lot of things that night. She found the address on Google Maps that night. Greenwich, Connecticut. She'd never been. Didn't know anyone who had. But she'd heard the name in that way you hear names attached to a kind of wealth that doesn't need to explain itself. She zoomed into the satellite image. Iron gate. Long driveway. Trees so tall and thick they blocked the house from view entirely. Like the property was trying to disappear. She searched the contact name. Roderick Halverson. Not much came up. A mention in a legal filing from 3 years ago. Nothing that answered anything. She searched the address itself. A company name appeared once. Virelli Holdings. She clicked it. The website was a single page. No photos, no staff list. Ain't no about us. Just a name and a number that wasn't the same one she'd been given. She sat with that for a while. Then she searched. Virelli Holdings, Greenwich Nanny. Nothing. She tried. $7,500 Nanny, Greenwich, Connecticut. Nothing. She tried. Live-in Nanny, Greenwich, Triplets. 1 result. A Reddit thread, 2 years old. The user account had been deleted, but the comment was still there, partially visible in the preview. 3 boys. Identical. I don't know how to explain what happened, but I left after the rest was cut off. She clicked the link. Page not found. She sat in the diner parking lot in her car, the car that was also technically her credit card's problem, and stared at that dead link for a full minute. A deleted account, a deleted page, a job listing with a warning instead of a welcome. So what a contact name that barely existed online. And the money, $7,500 a month. She opened her banking app, $11.08. She closed it. In the back seat, Cairo slept bundled under her hoodie in a blanket she kept folded there for exactly these kinds of nights. His breathing was slow, even, unbothered by the cold that was starting to creep into the car. She watched him in the rearview mirror. He hadn't complained once. Not about the diner, not about the cold, not about the fact that dinner had been 2 small cups of soup and a packet of crackers she'd found at the bottom of her bag. 7 years old, and already so careful with her. That was the thing that broke her every time. She pulled up the confirmation email again. Do not share the address. She thought about that Reddit comment, the one that ended mid-sentence. The part that said, I don't know how to explain what happened. She thought about 21 candidates. The number Halverson hadn't told her yet. She wouldn't hear it until tomorrow. But the language of the ad already suggested it. Previous candidates were not suitable. Plural, repeated, said like it was a pattern, not a coincidence. She should have driven away, should have found a shelter, called a number, figured something else out. Instead, she set a 6 a.m. alarm, pulled her own jacket tighter, and told herself what people with $11 always tell themselves when they're about to do something that scares them. It'll be fine. It has to be. She didn't sleep. Not really. But by morning, she was already on the highway. Greenwich was 2 hours north, and something was waiting for her there. Something she couldn't name yet. She drove toward it anyway. The GPS took her off the main road 20 minutes before the destination. No highway, no town. Just a 2-lane road that narrowed gradually, like it was trying to discourage her without saying so outright. Trees on both sides. Old ones. The kind that had been there long enough to know things. She drove slowly. Cairo pressed his face against the window. Are those cameras? He asked. She hadn't noticed them yet. She looked where he was pointing. A thin black housing mounted on a wooden post, half hidden by a branch. Then another. Then a third, angled differently, covering the blind spot the first 2 would miss. Probably, she said. Why does someone need that many cameras on a road? She didn't have a good answer for that. The gate appeared suddenly. Black iron, tall, the kind that doesn't swing. It slid, smooth and silent on a track buried in the ground, like it had seen her coming long before she arrived. The guard stepped out, not from a booth, from behind the tree line, like he'd been standing there waiting. He didn't ask for ID. He looked at her face, checked something on a tablet, looked at her face again. Miss Vance. Not a question, a confirmation. Yes, she said. He stepped back. The gate finished opening. She pulled through. The driveway was long enough to make you forget the gate had ever existed. Gravel that crunched in a way that felt deliberate, like the sound was meant to be heard. Trees overhead, thick and close. And then, all at once, they cleared. The house appeared. She'd expected big. She hadn't expected this. Stone. 3 stories. The kind of architecture that wasn't designed to impress. It was designed to last. Ivy growing up one corner, but controlled. Like even the plants had been told to stay in line. Every window was lit, not warmly, functionally, like the house was awake, not welcoming. She parked where a second guard gestured, a spot away from the main entrance, off to the side. She noted that. You don't put the interviewee in the side parking unless you've already decided what kind of person they are. She got out. Cairo reached for the door handle. Wait, she said. He froze. She'd arranged for him to stay with a neighbor this morning. A woman 2 floors down who watched kids for cash and didn't ask questions. Except she'd texted at 5 a.m. saying her own child was sick. So Cairo had come with her. She hadn't called ahead to say so. She looked at him now, backpack on, eyes wide and careful. Stay close, she said. Don't touch anything. I know, he said. She believed him. They walked toward the entrance together. The door opened before she reached it. A man stood in the frame. 50s, pressed shirt, the kind of face that had made a decision about you before you'd finished your sentence. Roderick Halverson. He looked at her, then at Cairo. Something behind his eyes recalibrated. You brought a child, he said. My arrangement fell through, she said. He won't be a problem. Halverson looked at Cairo again. A long look, the kind adults give children when they're really measuring the parent. Come in, he said finally, not warmly, but he stepped aside. And Sorrel walked into that house with $11 in her account and her son's hand in hers, and the door closed behind them with a sound like the first move in a game she didn't know the rules to yet. Roderick Halverson didn't offer coffee. He sat across from her in a room that wasn't quite an office and wasn't quite a sitting room. A room designed for conversations that needed to go nowhere comfortable. Bare walls, no art, no family photos. Just tall windows overlooking a garden so perfect it didn't feel real. Cairo sat beside her, backpack on his lap, watching everything with that careful, quiet attention he'd learned too early. Halverson opened a folder. 21 candidates, he said. He said it the way you'd read a statistic. No emotion, just data. Okay, 21 and how long, she asked. 14 months. She did the math without showing it on her face. More than one a month. Not turnover, a pattern. None lasted beyond 48 hours, he continued. 3 didn't complete the first day. What happened to them? He folded his hands over the folder. They found the position unsuitable. She noticed what he didn't say. He didn't say they quit. Didn't say we let them go. He said they found it unsuitable, as if the choice had been theirs, as if he were simply recording history. What does the position actually require, she asked. He listed it without looking at the paper. Live-in care, Monday through Friday, with some weekend availability. 3 boys, 8 years old. Daily routine, meals, homework, activity management. The father traveled frequently. And there was additional household staff, cook, groundskeeper, but they did not interact with the children. Why not? She asked. A brief pause. Mr. Varelli prefers the nanny manage the boys exclusively. She filed that. The boys, she said. Tell me about them. For the first time, something changed in Halverson's face. Not discomfort exactly, more like the expression of someone choosing how much truth to hand over. They are intelligent, he said, exceptionally so. And they don't respond well to authority they haven't chosen to accept. She waited. He added, they are coordinated. That word. Coordinated. Not difficult. Not energetic. Not a handful. Coordinated. Identical triplets? She asked. Physically, yes. You in temperament? Not remotely. Tell me the difference. Halverson seemed surprised, like the other 21 hadn't asked. Riven is the most visible, he said carefully. He acts first. Caius plans. He rarely moves without a reason. And Elio, he stopped. Elio what? Elio watches, she nodded. And Mr. Varelli, how involved is he with the boys day to day? The pause this time was longer. He provides for them completely, Halverson said, which wasn't what she'd asked. She didn't push it, not yet. Halverson closed the folder. The position is yours if you want it. Accommodation is provided. A full suite on the second floor. Your son would need to stay in town. He stays with me, she said immediately. That isn't the arrangement. Then we renegotiate, or I leave. She said it calmly, not a threat. Ain't a fact. He studied her. The way people look when they're deciding whether someone is difficult or just honest. I'll raise it with Mr. Varelli, he said. Thank you. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But something had shifted. Cairo leaned slightly toward her. She didn't reach for his hand, but she felt it. She heard them before she saw them. A crash from somewhere above. Silence. Then laughter. 3 versions of the same laugh, slightly offset, like an echo of an echo of an echo. Halverson led her up the main staircase. Cairo followed one step behind, both hands on his backpack straps. The second-floor hallway was long and carpeted and dotted with closed doors except one. Through it came noise. Not random noise, structured noise, a chair scraped. Something tipped over, and underneath it all, a low murmur, three voices speaking fast and quiet, the way people speak when they've just agreed on something. Halverson stopped at the door. He didn't open it. He knocked. A pause just long enough to mean something. Then one voice, calm, like it had been waiting, said, "Come in." Halverson pushed the door open and stepped aside. Sorrel walked in. Three boys, identical faces, same dark eyes, same jaw, same height. But the moment she entered, she understood what Halverson meant by not remotely the same in temperament. One stood near the window, arms loose, weight shifted forward. Ready. She knew before anyone spoke. That was Riven. The energy came off him like heat. One sat at a desk with a book open, not reading, watching, chin on one hand, the other flat on the table, controlled, measuring, Caius. One sat on the floor by the wall, not playing, just looking at her. "Elio." "This is Ms. Vance," Halverson said. No one responded, not rudely, just nothing. Like the introduction was information they already had and didn't need confirmed. Riven moved first, a slow circle around the room. Not around her, not exactly, but in a way that put him behind her anyway, testing whether she'd track him. She didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on Elio. Caius closed his book. "You brought a kid," he said. "My son," she said. "His name is Cairo." Caius looked at Cairo. Cairo looked back. Neither blinked. "How old?" Riven asked from behind her. "7, Cairo said. He'd answered before she could. "Good." "He's smaller than us," Riven said. "He's a year younger," Sorrel said. "Sit down, Riven." Brief silence. Riven appeared in her peripheral vision, coming back around to the front, slow and deliberate. He pulled out a chair and sat in it. Not because she told him to. She understood that immediately. He sat because it suited him, but he sat. Elio's eyes shifted from her to Cairo, back to her. He said nothing. That was the one she needed to pay attention to. Caius leaned back. "The last one lasted 4 hours," he said conversationally. "She cried in the hallway. Halverson had to call her a car." "I won't be doing that," Sorrel said. "That's what she said too." She met his eyes without blinking. "Then I guess you'll have to wait and see." Caius almost smiled. Almost. Riven knocked something off the desk. Not by accident. He was watching her face when he did it. She didn't flinch. Didn't look at the fallen object. I kept her eyes on him. Something moved across Riven's face. So fast she almost missed it. Interest. They hadn't broken her in the first 5 minutes. That was new. It happened on the second day. Not the first. The first day they tested limits. Small things you could almost excuse. Riven accidentally spilled water on the schedule she'd written. Caius asked questions designed to contradict each other, then waited to see which version she'd honor. Elio simply watched, which was, in its own way, the most unsettling thing. Cairo shadowed her, mostly quiet, occasionally whispering questions. She could feel the triplets studying that too, studying how she interacted with her own son, looking for angles. The second day came fast. Breakfast. Sorrel, Riven, Caius, Elio at the table. Cairo beside her, eating toast. The cook had stepped out, which seemed standard practice. Riven was eating standing up, which she'd already told him twice to stop. She was about to say it a third time. That's when the glass moved. It wasn't thrown hard. That was the thing. It wasn't a rage throw. It was an aim throw. The difference mattered. Rage you could predict. Aim meant someone had decided. It came fast. Corner of her eye. A drinking glass, half full of orange juice, coming at the side of her head. She turned, caught it, not perfectly. The juice sloshed cold over her hand. The glass wobbled in her grip but didn't fall. Silence. Total silence. Riven's arm was still slightly raised from the throw. He'd expected to miss. Or he'd expected her to duck. Either way, he hadn't expected her to catch it. Caius had gone completely still. Elio looked at her hand, at the glass, at her face, in that order. Sorrel set the glass down on the table. She didn't yell, didn't threaten, Didn't reach for a phone. She looked at Riven. That was a decision, she said. I want you to think about what you decided. Riven opened his mouth. Don't explain it, she said. Just think about it. She picked up her napkin, wiped the juice off her hands slowly. The way you wipe something when you're not in a hurry. When you're not scared. When the moment doesn't own you. Riven sat down, not because he was told. He sat because something had been removed from the room. Some invisible scaffolding the three of them had built around every previous nanny. Some guaranteed outcome this woman had quietly refused to participate in. Macias watched her like she was a problem he hadn't solved yet. Elio blinked. First time she'd seen him blink deliberately, like he was taking a photo with his eyes, storing it. Cairo beside her had frozen mid-bite. She looked at him. Eat your toast, she said gently. He chewed, slowly, watching the room. She ate too, calm, like someone hadn't just thrown a glass at her face. Like this was just a Tuesday. Like she had nowhere else to be and nothing to fear. It wasn't true. Her heart was going hard in her chest. Her hands still felt cold where the juice had hit. But she'd learned something important. Fear was fine. Showing it was the mistake. And these three boys had been fed fear so many times they'd learned to live on it. She didn't plan to be their next meal. She didn't meet him that first night. Or the second. Halverson said Mr. Varelli was traveling, would return Thursday. She should manage the household routine in his absence and document any significant incidents. She almost laughed. She documented the glass. On Thursday evening, she was at the kitchen table helping Cairo with multiplication tables, the ones that made him scrunch his face like he'd bitten something sour. When she felt it, not footsteps, not a door, just a shift in the air, the way a room feels different when it's no longer empty. She looked up. A man stood in the kitchen doorway, tall, dark coat still on, the kind of face that gave nothing away. Not because it was hiding something, but because it had decided, long ago, that expression was a form of vulnerability it couldn't afford. He looked at her. She looked back. You're still here, he said. Not impressed, not relieved, noting a fact. Seems like it, she said. He walked to the counter without ceremony, poured water from the filter, drank it standing. Everything he did was economical. No wasted movement, no performance. Dominic Varelli. She'd looked him up carefully in the 3 days she'd been in the house. Not much came up. A name in financial filings, a photo from a legal proceeding, 10 years old, blurry. Varelli Holdings appeared in 3 different industries in ways that didn't add up to a coherent business model, which wasn't accidental. Men like this didn't accidentally confuse their paper trail. How are they? He asked. Your sons? He turned with an expression that said he knew exactly who he meant. Riven threw a glass at me on day 2, she said. But I caught it. We moved on. Something crossed his face. Too fast to name. Halverson mentioned you brought your child, he said. I did. He's not a problem. That's not what I said. It's what you were about to say. A pause. His eyes moved to the homework on the table. To Cairo, who had looked up and was now staring at Dominic with the open, fearless curiosity of a child who hadn't yet learned that staring was considered rude. Dominic looked at Cairo for a long moment. Something happened in his face. Quickly. Gone before it could be identified. Don't let him wander the east wing, he said. Why? Because I said so. That's not an answer. He turned and faced her fully. She understood then what Halverson had meant. Mr. Varelli provides for them completely, said in that hollow, careful way. And Dominic Varelli provided everything measurable. Money, structure, physical safety. But he was standing in the same house as his 3 sons, and he hadn't asked where they were. She filed that. I'll tell him, she said. Dominic set the glass in the sink, straightened his jacket. Get them to bed by 9, he said. Riven won't sleep until 10, but he needs the dark time. And then he walked out. She listened to his footsteps fade. She looked at Cairo. He looked back at her. Is he the dad? He whispered. Yes, she said. Cairo looked at the doorway. He didn't ask about them, he said quietly. 7 years old. Saw it instantly. She went back to the multiplication tables, but she didn't stop thinking about it. She found him on the back terrace the next morning. Still early. The kind of early where the light was gray and the grass was wet and the world hadn't committed to the day yet. She'd come out for air, expecting nothing. He was already there, standing at the edge of the stone terrace with a coffee in his hand, looking at nothing in particular. She almost went back inside. She didn't. She walked to the other end of the terrace and stood there. He didn't acknowledge her. She didn't force it. For 2 full minutes, they existed in the same space without speaking, the way two people do when they've silently agreed that the other one is allowed to be there. Then he spoke. "Why haven't you left?" No preamble, no softening, just the question. She considered a partial truth, something professional. "I'm committed to the role. I believe I can help the boys." All of it would have been true enough. She said none of it. "My son eats in 3 days," she said. "After that, I don't know." Silence. She felt him recalibrate, like she'd used a word he hadn't expected. "The salary has been arranged," he said. "You'll receive." "I know," she said. "I mean before that." He was quiet. "I had $11 when I applied," she said. "Not as a figure of speech, my actual balance. I had nowhere else to go and no time left to be afraid. That's why I'm still here." She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the wet grass, the way the early light was just starting to catch its silver. She heard him breathe, slow, deliberate. 21 people, he said. None of them said anything like that. What did they say? The usual things, that they were experienced, patient, that they could handle difficult children. He paused. Some of them threatened legal action. Some cried. Which was worse, she asked. Something happened in his voice, a fracture, small, quickly sealed. The ones who cried, he said. She thought about that. They reminded you of someone, she said. It wasn't a question. It came out before she'd decided to say it. He turned and looked at her, and for the first time since she'd walked through those gates, Dominic Varelli looked at her like she was a person. Not a variable, not a test subject, not entry 22 on a list. A person. It lasted 1 second. Then the mask returned. Not harsh, just closed. The way a door closes when someone's not ready yet. Keep them on schedule, he said. Riven needs the dark time, she said. I know. You told me. He nodded, walked back inside. She stood there alone and thought about the way he'd said the ones who cried. Not with cruelty, but with something quieter and more complicated. Like watching someone break wasn't satisfying. Like it reminded him of a breaking he couldn't undo. She didn't know what that meant yet. She filed it. She was beginning to understand that this house was full of things that had been filed and never opened again. Her job, maybe, was to find out what happened when someone finally did. The boys changed strategy on day 4. Up until then, they'd been direct, probing, the glass, the contradictory questions, the circling. Riven acting first, Caius watching the reaction, Elio recording it all behind careful eyes. Day 4 was different. She woke at 5:40 a.m. to find the kitchen covered in flour. Not spilled, distributed. Someone, more than one someone, had opened every bag in the pantry and coated every surface in a fine white layer. The counters, the table, the floor, even the coffee machine. The overhead light was off, dawn light barely reached the windows, and the whole kitchen looked like a snow globe someone had shaken and left. She stood in the doorway, breathed, did not say a single word. She made oatmeal on the one burner that had been left clean. She noted that one clean burner, which meant the mess was controlled. Set the table in the flour-dusted dining room and called the boys for breakfast. They came down together, same pace, side by side. Riven looked at her face immediately, checking for damage. She handed him a bowl of oatmeal. After breakfast, she said, the 3 of you are cleaning the kitchen. We didn't do it, Riven said. I didn't say you did, she said. Caius studied her. There are only 4 people in this house right now, he said carefully, and you didn't do it. No, she agreed. She sat down and ate. They stood for a moment, working through the logic of what was happening, which was that she was neither confirming nor disputing what they'd done. She was simply telling them what came next. They sat, they ate, then they cleaned the kitchen. It took an hour and 20 minutes. Riven did it with loud resentment, banging the cloth, sighing every 30 seconds. Caius did it in focused silence. Elio did it slowly and thoroughly, wiping things twice, which told her either he was a perfectionist or he was punishing himself for something. She didn't ask. She worked alongside them. That was the part they hadn't expected. Not supervising, not watching from the doorway. She was on her knees scrubbing the baseboards, and every time she looked up, Elio was watching her with that still, unreadable expression. By the end, the kitchen was cleaner than when she arrived. That afternoon, she found her room reorganized. Not destroyed, reorganized. Clothes refolded but in the wrong drawers. Toiletries moved to different shelves. Her notebook, the one she kept her daily schedule in, was missing. She found it on her pillow that evening, open to a blank page. One sentence written at the top in 3 different handwritings, like a relay. "We know where everything is." She read it again, set it on the nightstand. She was not dealing with difficult children. Yes, she was dealing with a system, a living, thinking, adaptive system that had learned, through 14 months and 21 people, exactly how to manufacture a breaking point. And now it was recalibrating because its standard tools weren't working. The question was what it would try next. She didn't sleep until she had an answer. She started keeping her own notes, not in the notebook, that one they'd found. She kept new ones buried in a notes app on her phone under a grocery list that didn't look like a grocery list. She wrote observations, not feelings. Observations. Riven always acts within 30 minutes of a transition. New activity, new person, new room. He needs to establish control before the new thing settles. Caius never acts first. He waits for Riven to absorb the consequence, then adjusts his approach. And he is not impulsive, he is surgical. Elio does not participate in disruption. He documents it. He is the debrief. She watched them for 3 more days. She stopped reacting to Riven's outbursts and started naming them instead. "That's the transition energy," she said once, when he knocked a stack of books off the shelf walking into the study. "Give it 2 minutes. You'll level out." He stared at her. "What?" "You always do something physical when you enter a new space. You probably don't notice it." He didn't respond, but he didn't knock anything else over. She started giving Caius information before he asked for it. She'd learned that his provocations were really questions. He needed the structure before he could settle into it. So she'd lay out the day's plan at breakfast, in specifics. Ornan watched his shoulders drop half an inch. He never thanked her. But the provocation slowed. Elio was the hardest. He remained quiet, watching. She began addressing him directly. Not his behavior, but the thought behind it. "You're trying to figure out if I'll still be here next week," she said one morning, catching him watching her in the kitchen mirror. He looked at his cereal. "Everyone leave," he said. "I know," she said. "So why are you acting like you won't?" She didn't say because I will. She didn't say because I care about you. Both would have been weapons he'd already learned to disarm. She said, "Because right now, today, I'm here. That's the only part I can promise." He looked at her. Long, then went back to his cereal. Later that day, one of the books Riven had knocked off the shelf appeared on her bed, placed neatly, spine up, open to a random page. She couldn't prove who put it there, but she had an idea. She started reviewing the pattern of departures, not from what the boys had told her, from what she could infer. Every nanny had reached a breaking point within 48 hours, some in 12. The incidents were never identical. They were tailored. The flower was different from what they'd done to the woman Caius once mentioned needed very clean spaces. The glass throw was different from the previous one who got scared easily. They were profiling and executing. A personalized demolition for every candidate. These weren't troubled boys acting out. These were 3 8-year-olds who had spent over a year building and refining a system designed to do one specific thing: make people leave before they got too close. She didn't know why yet, but she knew it had nothing to do with behavior. It had everything to do with protection. It happened on a Thursday evening. She'd been in the house 9 days. Cairo had gone to sleep early. The long walks around the property in the fresh air had been quietly exhausting him in the best way, and by 8 o'clock he was gone. The triplets were supposed to be in their rooms. She was at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea, adding to her notes, when she heard it. A small sound from the hallway. Deliberate, not an accident. Elio appeared in the doorway. Just him, not the others. Pajamas, bare feet. And he looked younger like this, without the watchful tension that lived in his face during the day. Still careful, but softer. He stood at the edge of the kitchen like he was waiting for permission. "Sit down," she said. He sat, across from her, hands flat on the table. She waited. He was the kind of person, renderer even at 8, who would say what he came to say in his own time, and rushing him would only push it back further. The kitchen clock ticked. A car passed somewhere beyond the gates, far away. "Why are you still here?" he asked. "You've asked me that before," she said. "I know." His eyes were steady. "I want a different answer." She thought about it. "Leaving doesn't fix anything," she said. He turned the sentence over like he was examining it. "Neither does staying," he said. Sometimes it does." "Not here." She leaned forward slightly. "What's happened here when someone stayed?" He looked down at his hands. One finger traced an invisible line on the table, just like Cairo's invisible drawings in the diner booth. She noticed that. "Nothing," he said. "No one has stayed." "Until now," she said. He looked up. "You'll leave," he said. Not cruel, not sad, stated the way you'd state weather, a thing that had happened enough times to be considered law. "I might," she said honestly. "I don't know everything about this house yet." He blinked. Most adults had probably told him the opposite. "I won't leave, I promise. I'm not like the others." Empty architecture. He'd watched it all fall. She hadn't promised. He noticed. "She used to sit here," he said, carefully, quietly, like he was testing whether the words would break something. "Who did?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "In the morning," he said, "before anyone else was up, she'd sit right there," he nodded at her chair, "and drink her tea, not talking, not doing anything. Just here." Sorrel didn't move. "She sounds like someone worth knowing," she said softly. Elio nodded. "Once." "What happened to her?" Sorrel asked. He looked at the table again. "She left," he said. The word had weight, not just ordinary departure. Something heavier. Something with edges. "Did she want to?" Sorrel asked. His jaw moved, tightened, like he was holding something behind his teeth. He stood up from the chair. "You should lock your door at night," he said. Then he walked back down the hallway. She sat there for a long time. When that wasn't about manners, that was a warning. She didn't lock her door that night. She kept the light on instead. Not defiance, visibility. She wanted to be seen. She wanted anyone moving through that hallway at 2 a.m. to pass her open, lit room and know she wasn't asleep, wasn't hiding, wasn't afraid. She fell asleep in the desk chair. Woke at 5 a.m. with a stiff neck and barely their sunlight touching the window. Nothing had happened. She stretched, checked on Cairo, started the day. The shifts came small and slow. On Friday, she set up a strategy game on the dining room table, one that required 3 players, cooperation, and 45 minutes of commitment. She told them nothing about it except that the pieces were there. She went to make lunch. She came back 20 minutes later. They were playing. Riven was arguing loudly about a rule interpretation. Caius was citing the rulebook from memory. Elio was quietly mediating, keeping the game from imploding. She stood in the doorway and said nothing. She just let it run. Saturday, Caius came to her after breakfast. He stood beside her at the kitchen counter and didn't speak for almost a full minute. She kept working, wiping the counter, sorting the groceries, and let him take his time. "Riven's scared of the dark," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her sideways. "He doesn't want you to know." "I know that too," she said, "which is why we don't discuss it." Caius was quiet. "How did you know?" he asked. "He always leaves the bathroom light on," she said, "and he checks the hallway twice before closing his door." Caius processed this slowly, deliberately, with no wasted energy. "He thinks it makes him weak," he said. "It doesn't," she said. "I know that," Caius said, like it was obvious, like the only person who hadn't figured it out was Riven. "But he'll never admit it." "He doesn't have to," she said. Caius looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and went back to his room. That afternoon, she quietly moved a small nightlight to the outlet nearest Riven's door. Said nothing. Framed it as nothing. She heard him in the hallway at 10 p.m. Long pause by the outlet. Then his door closing. No second check. By Sunday, she was eating breakfast alongside all of them. Not managing, not mediating, just present. Cairo beside her, talking fast about everything. And gradually, across 3 mornings, the triplets began to respond to him. Riven taught him how to fold a napkin into a triangle hat. Elio corrected Cairo's multiplication 3 times without being asked. Gently. Caius watched all of it and said nothing, but he stayed at the table longer than usual. An extra 5 minutes, then 10, every morning. She didn't remark on it. She just let it be. Trust doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask permission. It just quietly takes up more space than it used to. And for 3 boys who had spent 14 months destroying every person placed in front of them, a quiet Tuesday morning felt, maybe, like something almost safe. She found it by following Elio. She hadn't meant to follow him. She'd been looking for Cairo, the particular quiet of a child exploring somewhere he wasn't supposed to. And she'd rounded the corner of the east wing to find Elio standing outside a door at the far end of the hallway. Not touching the door, just standing in front of it. He heard her and turned. His face did something complicated, not caught, not guilty, something more like a child caught grieving. The private kind that doesn't want an audience. "What's in there?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," he said. "Okay," she said. She didn't push. She walked back to find Cairo, predictably in the sunroom, looking at a shelf of board games he had no permission to touch. But she remembered the door. 2 days later, she was in the east wing, replacing a light bulb. The groundskeeper was off, and she'd made a list of small repairs. And she found herself at the end of that hallway again. The door was darker wood than the others. Old brass handle. A regular lock, the old kind, with a keyhole big enough to look through. She didn't look through it. She tried the handle. Locked. She turned to go. That's when she noticed it. Low on the inside of the door frame, near the floor, where no adult would ever look unless they were specifically looking for it. Scratch marks. Repeated letters, carved carefully into the wood. Not the door, the frame. Like someone had pressed close and written on the part the door would cover when it opened. She crouched, looked. A name. Alessia. Over and over. Different pressures. To some deep and deliberate. Some light, almost like a breath. Different sessions. Different moods. Like someone had come here again and again over a long time and pressed their need into the wood because there was nowhere else to put it. She stood up. Her knees felt unsteady in a way that had nothing to do with the crouching. She thought about Elio in the kitchen. She used to sit here. She'd just be here. She thought about the way he'd said she left. That word with the heavy edges. She thought about Dominic's voice at 6 a.m., saying the ones who cried. That small fracture he'd sealed before she could see inside it. She thought about a locked room in the east wing. The wing he'd told her to keep Cairo out of, with no explanation. She thought about a name carved near the floor by 3 small hands, now returning over and over to the only place in this house where it was allowed to exist. Not graffiti, devotion, the kind a child practices when the thing they love is out of reach. She left the hallway, put the light bulbs away, made dinner. But the name stayed with her. Alessia. Not gone, not moved on. Erased. And the only evidence she'd ever existed was down near the floor in a corner where you'd have to get on your knees to see it. She wondered if Dominic had ever looked. She didn't tell anyone what she'd found. Not yet. But it changed the way she looked at everything. She looked at the boys differently. Not as a behavioral problem, not as an extraordinary challenge, as 3 children carrying something heavy. Something they'd been carrying alone, in a house that had never once asked them to put it down. And she watched Riven tear through afternoons like an engine with no gear below 5th. Watched Kaya sit with his books and careful questions, building a wall of logic against something that didn't have a logical shape. Watched Elio stand outside that door. She hadn't told Elio she'd seen the name, but on the 4th evening after, she sat beside him on the back steps while the others were inside. He had a stick and was drawing shapes in the dirt. not random shapes. Letters. She watched for a while without speaking. Then quietly, "Tell me about her." Elio's hand stopped. "You found it," he said. "I found the door," she said carefully. "I was changing a bulb." Long silence. He traced a circle over what he'd drawn, covering it. "Every nanny gets close eventually," he said. "They stop being scared. Oh, they start trying to understand. They ask questions." He paused. "Then something happens." "What kind of something?" she asked. He drew another line. Slow, deliberate. "They find out about her," he said. "Or they start asking, and then—" He stopped. "And then they leave," she said. He didn't answer, because yes was too small a word for what he meant. She could feel the shape of the real answer. It wasn't just that they left. It was that something about what they found made them decide leaving was safer than staying. "Elio," she said carefully. "Who is she?" He looked up at her for the first time during the conversation. "Our mom," he said, just like that. No setup, no performance. Just a fact he'd been waiting for the right person to ask. "What's her name?" Sorrel asked, as if she didn't already know. "Alessia," he said. She kept her face neutral. Let him continue. "She was here," he said. "And then she wasn't. And he—" A careful pause like a board with nails in it. "He doesn't say her name. Took the photos down, locked the room, and if you ask about it—" He stopped himself. "What?" she said. "It doesn't go well," he said flatly. She thought about 21 women, every single one gone within 48 hours. She thought about 3 boys standing outside a locked door in a hallway they weren't supposed to be in, pressing a name into a doorframe because they couldn't say it anywhere else. "I'm not going to stop asking about her," she said. Elio looked at her. For a long, long moment, he just looked. And then he said something she hadn't expected. "I know," he said, not as a warning. Not even with hope exactly. Too much had happened for hope to come easily. But with something. The small, fragile, bruised beginning of it. The truth came from Riven. It always came from Riven. He was the one who acted first, who said too much, who couldn't hold weight inside him without eventually throwing it at something. The same mechanism that had sent that glass at her face on day 2. The body releasing what the mind couldn't contain. Saturday afternoon, she'd been running a loose obstacle course in the back garden. Cairo's idea, aggressively engineered by Riven, quietly optimized by Caius, observed by Elio from a lawn chair. Loud, physical, the kind of afternoon that temporarily empties a child of whatever was in them. Afterward, the 4 of them spread across the back steps in grass, breathing hard. Cairo laughing about something, Caius explaining why one particular jump had been structurally unsound. Then Riven went quiet. Not his usual loud quiet. Not "I'm about to do something," just still, staring at nothing. Sorrel sat beside him. Not close, just near. She waited. "We do it on purpose," Riven said. Flat, simple. "I know," she said. He turned sharply. "You know? I figured it out around day 4. Something moved across his face, relief and embarrassment, and a strange kind of pride at having been seen. "Then why are you still here?" he asked. "Because understanding why someone does something isn't the same as agreeing with it," she said. He turned away, picked up a twig, broke it in half. "We've been doing it since the first one," he said. "Caius made the plan. He said if we could make them leave fast before they got settled, then—" He stopped. "Then what?" she said. He broke the twig again, smaller. "Then we controlled it," he said. "They leave because of us, not because of—" He stopped again, set the twig down. His jaw worked. Caius appeared from the other side of the steps. He'd been listening. Of course he had. "Not because of him," Caius said. Quiet, complete. Like finishing a sentence he'd been writing in his head for 18 months, the words sat between them. Sorrel didn't move. "Your father," she said. Neither of them confirmed it. Neither needed to. She thought about what this actually meant. 3 boys, 8 years old, running a coordinated departure system across 14 months. Not because they were cruel, not because they craved chaos. More because chaos was safer than attachment. Because if they drove someone away, they controlled the leaving, and if they controlled the leaving, They wouldn't have to feel it happen to them again, the way it had happened once before, with someone who hadn't chosen to go, someone who had been taken from them, or pushed, or erased, and who they hadn't been able to stop. She looked at Elio, still in the lawn chair. He was watching her, not with the usual measured stillness, with something stripped back, raw, waiting. She said nothing. She placed her hand flat on the grass between her and Riven, not reaching for him, just there, present, near. After a long moment, Riven leaned his shoulder against hers, just slightly, just enough. She heard them at 11 p.m. Alert wakefulness. The edge of sleep listening she'd trained herself into across years of landlord knocks and children's cries and nights when a sound could mean very different things. Male voices, low, the east wing. She lay still and listened. She couldn't make out words. The house was thick stone and heavy wood, built for privacy, but she made out tones, multiple voices, not raised, the particular quiet of men who'd learned to speak in frequencies that didn't carry, then a name, or half of one, Kovarik, then a door, then nothing. She sat up. She knew that kind of meeting, not from first-hand experience, from proximity, from the buildings she'd grown up near in Newark, from the way men went quiet when someone walked past, from the way certain names made rooms change temperature. She got up, because she wasn't going to the east wing. She opened her door a fraction, and in the wedge of dim hallway light, counted 3 silhouettes disappearing around the far corner. Dominic and 2 others. One was large. The other moved with careful deliberateness, the way people who have been trained to be unnoticed move. She closed the door. The next morning, Dominic was in the kitchen before her. He looked exactly the same, composed, no evidence of a 3 a.m. meeting in the way he held his coffee or looked at the window. Either nothing was wrong or something was deeply wrong, and he'd had years of practice making both look identical. She put the kettle on. "You were up late," she said. He looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching. "Stay in your room at night," he said, not harsh, immediate. "I heard voices," she said. I checked the hallway. That's what I do in any house where I was responsible for children." He was quiet. "The boys are not in any danger," he said. "Are you certain?" He turned fully. He looked at her with something she hadn't seen before. Not coldness, not composure. Something worn. The look of a man who'd been carrying weight long enough that it showed around the edges now, faint as a watermark. "The house is secure," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm asking about you." A pause. She hadn't planned to say it. It landed with a directness she couldn't take back. He stared at her. "That's not your concern," he said. "Maybe not," she said. "But Riven has nightmares on nights when this house feels different. Caius went quiet at dinner last night before you'd even come home. And Elio checked every window in the upstairs hallway at 9 p.m. She set her mug down. "They feel everything in this house, including whatever you're carrying." Dominic looked at his coffee. Long silence. "Stay in your room at night," he said again. He walked out, but she'd watched his hands. He was gripping the mug. First tell he hadn't hidden. She filed it. She found him in the study that evening. She knocked. He said nothing, but she could see light under the door, hear the absence of movement that meant he'd heard and was waiting. She pushed it open. He was at the desk. Real documents, not a laptop, actual papers with small print and multiple signatures. He closed the folder before she could see anything. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Then talk." She walked in. In the study was the one room in the house that felt personal. Books that had actually been read, a worn rug, a photograph on the shelf turned slightly away from the door. She'd noticed that photograph before. Not of the boys, not of him. She sat in the chair across from his desk. "You're isolating them," she said. He looked up. "Excuse me." "The boys," she said. "No school, they're tutored. No friends. No extended family that I can see. The staff doesn't interact with them. You travel frequently. And the one person who was closest to them," she watched his face, "isn't here anymore." Dominic's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I know 3 8-year-olds who spent over a year systematically driving away every adult placed in their care," she said. Not because they're broken, and because they're protecting themselves. Because they learn that people who get close to them disappear. And they decided they'd rather control the leaving. He was very still. They're not afraid of nannies, she said. They're afraid of you, of what happens to people in this house, of what happened to... She paused. The name was already in the room. It had been since the first morning. Alessia. The room changed, not visibly, not loudly, but everything contracted, tightened. Dominic stood. Leave this topic alone, he said. I'm not going to. This is not your... I caught a glass with my bare hands on day 2 and stayed, she said. I've been here 16 days and I know your son's better than you seem to. I am not going to pretend I don't see what I see because it makes things easier for you. No heat in it. No cruelty. Just clarity. He looked at her. Long. She expected anger. She expected dismissal, or that quiet, absolute tone that ended conversations. He didn't. He sat back down. He put both palms flat on the desk like he was trying to keep something from rising. You don't know what she found, he said quietly. There it was. Not she left. Not that's private. What she found. As if the reason for her absence was information. Something discovered. Something dangerous enough to change everything. Sorrel sat very still. Tell me, she said. His jaw worked. His hands pressed harder against the desk. Not tonight, he said. Rough. Ground down. She nodded. She stood. Walked to the door. When you're ready, she said. I'll still be here. She meant it. And the terrifying part, the part she felt without seeing it, was that he believed her. He told her the following night. No setup. No preamble. She came downstairs for water at midnight, and he was sitting at the kitchen table. Not working, not on his phone. Just sitting, like he'd been waiting for the only person in the house who might actually hear it. She sat. He talked, slowly at first, then faster. The way you talk when something has been contained too long and the container finally cracks. Alessia Varelli had not left. She had not grown tired of the life or decided the boys were too much or found someone else. None of the things a child is quietly made to believe when a parent simply stops being present. She had found something. 3 years ago, she'd been in this study looking for a property deed. Something mundane, something domestic. And she'd found the wrong file. Names, accounts, a structure of money and influence that ran through Varelli Holdings and connected to men who were not businessmen. Men like Kovarik, a network that predated Dominic, that he'd inherited, that he'd been trying for years to exit cleanly without being destroyed in the process. Alessia had seen it. She'd confronted him. And Dominic, cornered, afraid, in the most dangerous period of his attempt to separate himself from people who don't allow separation, had made a choice. He told her she had to go. Not because he stopped loving her, not because he wanted her gone, but because she'd seen it. And people who were visibly connected to him and had visibly seen it became leverage and became targets, became vulnerability. He sent her away to protect her. He told the boys she'd left. He took the photos down, locked the room, buried the name. He thought if no one could reach her through them, she'd be safe. He thought if the boys didn't know the truth, they'd grieve less. He was wrong on both counts. Sorrel sat with everything he'd said. She looked at his hands, still flat on the table, pressing down like the ground might give way. Where is she? She asked. Safe, he said. Different city, different name, protected. A pause. I haven't spoken to her in 2 years. Does she know about the boys? His face didn't answer, which was an answer. Dominic, she said carefully, your sons think she chose to leave. They believe that people leave because that's what people do. They've spent a year and a half destroying every relationship before it can fail them. Because you let them live inside a story where abandonment is just how love ends. He didn't speak. They didn't break 21 people, she said. You did. Every person who walked out of this house walked out carrying what you withheld from your sons. His jaw was set, eyes fixed on the table. I'm not saying you made the wrong choice, she said. I don't know what you were up against. Maybe sending her away was the only move you had. She leaned forward slightly. But the cost was 3 boys who don't know how to let anyone stay. Silence. Long. hollow. Then he put his head in his hands, and she let him. Because some truths don't need a response. They just need a room big enough to finally exist in. 3 days later, the house wasn't safe. She felt it first. Not a specific thing, not a sound or a sight, a shift. The same shift she'd learned to read in Riven, who went quietest right before something broke. The house was like that on a Wednesday. Too quiet. The groundskeeper hadn't shown. The cook came in at 7, was gone by 8. An hour early, no explanation. 2 of the security cameras at the front gate were on a slow pivot that wasn't their standard pattern. She knew enough now to know what that meant. She found Dominic at 8:15 a.m. in the study. "Something's happening," she said. He was on a call. He held up one finger. "Wait." She waited. He ended the call. Stood. Moved with purpose but not panic, which was somehow worse than panic. "I need you to take the boys and your son to the East Wing," he said. It's the East Wing. The room beside the locked one. Third door from the end. He opened his desk drawer, handed her a key on a plain ring. "Lock it from the inside. Don't open it for anyone except me or Halverson." She took the key. "How long?" she asked. "I don't know." He met her eyes. Sorrel. First time he'd used her name. "They'll be scared," he said. "They'll hear things. Don't let them open that door." "I know," she said. She went. She was calm because someone had to be. Cairo was eating cereal. She told him they were doing something special today. A quiet room, board games, a long morning. And he looked at her face and understood that calm was what was needed and became calm. Just like that. The triplets were harder. Riven knew immediately. "What's happening?" He stood in his doorway with the look of a boy who'd been braced for exactly this for 18 months. "Change of plans today. We're spending the morning together. Let's go." "That's not Riven." The voice you use when there's no time. "Now." He looked at her, ran the calculation. He came. All 4 of them were in the room within 4 minutes. Door locked. Board games on the floor. She sat in the center of them like a compass point and started talking. Not about what was happening, but about anything else. Riven sat close to her, so close his shoulder pressed against her arm. Not hiding, just near. Caius took the chess set and began setting up pieces with quiet focus, using the routine of it to steady himself. Elio sat facing the door, listening. They all heard it. Distant movement downstairs. Voices, one raised, then not. A door. Silence. Then a sound that might have been outside. Cairo pressed his back against her side. She put one arm around him, and she sat in that locked room in a house that belonged to a man she'd known for less than 3 weeks, with 4 children pressed around her like she was the only fixed point in a room that was tilting. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She stayed. That was all she had. It turned out to be enough. By noon it was over. She knew it when Dominic's knock came. 3, then 2, the pattern she'd given him. And when she opened the door and saw his face, she recognized the particular blankness of someone who'd come through something and hadn't yet started to feel it. "Done," he said. She stepped aside. When he walked in, he looked at his sons. Riven first, then Caius, then Elio. A long look at each one, not speaking, then quietly to all of them. "I'm sorry about this morning." None of them spoke immediately. Riven looked at his shoes. Caius looked at Dominic's face with the particular attention of a child deciding whether the truth was in the expression or behind it. Elio looked at him the way Elio looked at everything now, openly, with the fragile, bruised beginnings of a hope he was still not entirely sure was wise. That afternoon, Sorrel walked with Dominic in the back garden. She told him what needed to happen. Not a list, not demands. Just Alessia should know. The boys should know. The story they'd been living, the one about a mother who chose to leave, needed to be dismantled. Not because the truth was easier, but because the lie was actively shaping 3 boys into people who couldn't let anyone stay. He pushed back on 2 things. She held her ground on both. It wasn't a fight. It was 2 people who had earned enough honesty with each other to use it. By the end of the walk, he said, "I'll think about it." She knew by now that for him, that was most of the way to yes. Over the next 3 weeks, small things changed. Dominic started having breakfast with the boys twice a week, not performing, not narrating, just present, eating, listening to Riven argue about everything, to Caius explain his current reading, to Elio say little but mean a great deal. The boys stopped the tests, not all at once, gradually. The way ice doesn't melt in a moment, it starts at the edges. Near Riven stopped throwing things. Caius stopped the surgical provocations. Elio started speaking first sometimes instead of waiting to be asked. One morning she came downstairs to find all three of them at the kitchen table with Cairo, deep in what appeared to be an argument about which superhero could beat which and why. Riven gesturing widely, Caius citing physics, Elio saying almost nothing but smiling at the corner of his mouth. She stood in the doorway. Just a moment. Then she made coffee and sat down and joined the argument. And the house that morning felt like something it hadn't felt in a long time. Occupied, not populated, not staffed. Occupied, ejo, by people who were choosing every single day to still be there. Sorrel had arrived with $11.08 in her bank account and a son who had learned not to ask for pancakes and a hoodie she used as a blanket and no plan beyond the next 3 days. She hadn't come with answers. She hadn't come with strength or training or the right word for every hard moment. She'd come with nothing. And it turned out that nothing, the absolute stripped bare willingness to have nothing to lose and still not leave, was the only thing powerful enough to walk through a system that had been built, brick by careful brick, to make people go. She stayed. That was all. That was everything. If you've ever stayed somewhere you were supposed to run from, comment I stayed. I read every single one.